Okay. May I ask for your attention after the coffee break? I know it's always difficult to bounce people back in. We naturally got some half an hour delay with the first session, but hopefully it was interesting for you. Welcome back. So please take a seat. We're going to start with a new session. And thank you again for coming today. Given the effort to bring together so many actors, it's really good to see a full room. And so I am Fabio Poretti. I work as Technical and Scientific Officer at CEWEP. In particular, I'm responsible for energy and climate policies. And I've been closely following the ETS revision for the last 6 years. So until the revision started with the Green Deal in 2020. So with panel one, what we wanted to do, we tried to address the question if ETS is fit for waste. And let me thank again the European Commission, our previous panelists, and all of you for the very constructive discussions. But now, together, let's look beyond. Let's do a step more. And let's try to understand what we need to do to create a strong policy that really fit for waste. Now, with the event today, we didn't want to create a football match where we have two teams, the pro-ETS team and the team that is against the ETS. I think that the question and something we have to ask ourselves is if we're looking at the problem from the right angle. And I carefully followed what has been discussed before, especially about cost, where these should be put. But I think there is another perspective that we should take that especially is not really common in the ETS world, but that's something we have already started to investigate a bit deeply. And it was also interesting to hear before a proposal on having a zero rate for emission for waste. Well, I think, and as was actually said, we cannot hide that there are CO2 emissions from waste to energy and that we have fossil CO2 emissions. As we said in our climate roadmap, these are inevitable due to the hygienic task, this environmental service that we provide. But then the point is, when we talk about fossil CO2 emissions from waste, who is the real polluter? Is it the waste-to-energy plant that takes the waste and treats it safely? Or the citizens that throw away the waste in the bin? Or maybe there is also a responsibility higher, upstream, at the production level to whoever extract a virgin fossil feedstock from the ground, like oil and gas, refine it, transform it into a chemical, and maybe then plastics or a non-recyclable plastics object that ultimately will be incinerated and will be transformed into fossil CO2 at our installations. And these are the emissions that today we're talking about in terms of covering them under an EU ETS scheme or in general under a national pricing scheme. The concept is exactly the same. So this is something that we have to really look at unless, of course, we accept the possibility that was also mentioned a bit before, that we want to use landfills as a perfect carbon sink for non-recyclable fossil material. But then we need to look, okay, maybe that's good for the climate, but that's not good for the environment. So I want to explore and investigate this different perspective today that I believe has been lacking discussions here in Brussels. So probably today is the right time to do this. And I'm happy to call on stage a very good set of valuable speakers, starting with Tobias Persson, Senior Advisor for Climate Policy at the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency. Let's give to all of them a good round of applause. We then stay up in the Nordics, close to Sweden, but we go to Denmark, but now with one of our operators. So we'd like to welcome Jakob Simonsen, CEO of ARC in Copenhagen, Denmark. We're then very, very happy to host a member of the European Parliament, Onorevole Alessandra Moretti from Italy, and part of the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats. Benvenuta.
Grazie.
We will then hear the perspective from an important technology supplier in the waste-to-energy field. So I would like to welcome on stage Vanessa Fakra, from Director of Regulatory Affairs at Kanadevia Inova. Please. And last, but of course not least, and in a circularity perspective to close the loop, as we started with the Commission, I'm pleased to welcome Karolina D'Acunha, Deputy Head of Unit from Waste to Resources at DG Environment. And again, as an organizer of this event, Karolina, let me thank you for the availability, for stepping in a bit last minute to your colleague François Bakenut. We are very glad that today DG Environment is also taking part of this, I think, core event for the future of our industry. Thank you very much. Very good. So we have a full panel, and I'm very honored to be in this position. It's a bit difficult to see all of you, so I have to maybe step here. Tobias, to look at you. Let's start with you because it was also mentioned before. Sweden has been in the ETS already since 2013. It was voluntarily included, so for already 13 years. And you published a report on this topic. As an agency, you worked a lot on this. It came online at the beginning of this year, and I encourage all the audience to go out and check it online. It's available. We also use it as a CEWEP, as a very valid reference. And in this report, you also focus the issue of plastics and the polluter pays principle. So coming to your question, from the eyes of an environmental agency, what has been the experience for you guys with the ETS for waste so far? Do you think this is enough, or do we really need a bridge upstream with producers to make it effective?
Thank you, Fabio, and thanks for the opportunity to be here and discuss these important and also very challenging issues. Let me start with just, I come from the Swedish EPA, but I don't speak for the side of the Swedish government, so we are aware about that because they don't represent any position. So our analysis tends to be very objective. And if we come to our conclusion, it's, we would say, bringing the waste incineration into the ETS. But at the same time, you need to either have a ban on landfills, on organic and combustible waste, or introduce them also into the ETS with standard values, with the opportunity to use real values if the status is too good enough. Or actually a combination maybe would be the best, because it gives strong incentives, including the price signal. And the basis actually for these conclusions, then I come back to what Mette was mentioning in the previous session. It's rather simple but also decisive that emissions from these sectors, both waste incineration and landfills, must decrease. Otherwise we will get in trouble to reach climate neutrality before 2050 and thereafter be climate negative. So it's actually the main reason that we need to go forward here. And do nothing is not a solution. And for this transition to function effectively, the right conditions are required. And we therefore need to create a level playing field within the European Union for managing both organic and combustible waste. In practice, this means that the price signals must be harmonized between different member states. And therefore, it's simple to go into the ETS scheme because that's the option on board from the European side. If we don't go there, we create incentives with this distortion and the inefficiencies treating the waste. But you mentioned, Fabio, you wanted to speak about the experience from Sweden. And this have been there for a while now, and initially, when we include the waste incineration into landfills, we already had a ban on landfills. So we started there, and we was on a journey. And when we introduced it, it was with free allocation. The ETS price was very low, so the incentive actually for the waste incinerators to do investments was very low. However, the last years the free allocation had begun to be phased out, and also the ETS price increased. So we see now that we see concrete changes. We see that the companies have differentiated gate fees based on plastic content. They have investment in pre-sorting of commercial waste. And we also see that companies planning for investment in CCUS. And it's just rather difficult to see these signals because it's a long-term transition, which means that we need long-term incentives also. So it will take time to actually recognize the result of this. And of course, you also need to remember that when we introduced the ETS, the capacity of waste incineration was about 5.5 million tons in Sweden. Today it's 7.2 million tons. So we have increased it in the same time as we have been into ETS. Which also makes it rather difficult to interpret the impact in quantity terms. So we can see that we start to see good examples. In the same time, we need to be realistic about the challenges here. Since higher cost emission allowances also creates incentives to shift waste to facilities with lower or no pricing. So, of course, it can be, if not all waste incineration or landfill is treated well in Europe, it can be up in other places in Europe or outside Europe. But it also can be the case it will be treated illegally. And this is mainly a question about the waste management is a collective problem for the society. So the key problem as a consequence of this is that the cost which hits you as waste incinerator is not born of the producer putting the product on the market or the consumers. The full cost is not integrated today. And this means that the market don't function very well. So, for example, if we have a cost of CCS in waste incineration, that cost will not be fully integrated into the goods put on the market. Even if this cost for the consumers will be, I would say, small, or very small actually, for the goods, compared to the price of the goods, at least, it will be crucial also for the waste incinerator actually to have this investment paid through the value chain. So this is an example of a clear market failure, actually, which means that we need some other policy incentives. So we see that we need also, if we include it in TS, waste incineration landfill, we still need complementary measures like which will increase the circularity of plastics, reduce also emissions from waste incineration, that we actually support the transition to CCS, at least in the beginning. This can be treated preferably on the EU level through a fee on the consumption of plastic products, or by including these costs into the producer responsibility schemes. Or we can, one option is also to let the fossil producers or petrochemical industries to bring this cost. However, the last option here, I think it's far away, because this industry have shown the last months that it's very conservative and will be on board solving this climate issue in Europe. So it's for political, at the same time they have high impact on the politician level. So personally, I think it's realistic. Then it's more realistic that we have a fee on consumption or include it in the producer responsibility scheme. So if I should conclude, we need both stick with the ETS, increase input to the price, but at the same time we need a carrot to support this transition. Otherwise, we'll get into problems.
Yes. Thank you very much, Tobias. So is it working? Yes. This is precisely what I want to explore really today, because if we linearly follow the principle of the ETS, the EU ETS that gives rights to emit, gives out allowances, I think plastic producers could still be allowed to produce and sell non-recyclable plastics made with virgin fossil feedstock, but they will have to pay for somebody at the end of the value chain, like waste to energy, that can take care of that carbon, or will have a price to pay under a climate scheme regime. Is this pretty much the same concept that maybe you have also been thinking in Sweden? Because I know in Sweden, you also came out with an interesting possibility of developing a plastic tax to actually finance CCS to waste to energy. Could you say a bit more about this?
Actually, it comes from a different agency, this proposal, and from the Swedish EPA, we actually look into this now. But in reality, this will be much more functional doing at the EU level compared to a small state like Sweden, because we are very small and we have limited resources, but still someone needs to lead these markets. So we look into even more in detail. So it can be a form of a tax or fee, or that we actually try to include it in the producer responsibility fees.
So as you're here today in Brussels and you represent the national authority, how it's important an EU-wide approach, and actually even beyond EU, because also we have today representatives and members from the UK, from Norway, Switzerland. How strong and it's this rather than coming out individually at national level?
In reality, you need the level playing field. So because we treat the waste which we are trading between member states and also outside the member states, and you mentioned petrochemical industry, which is a very global industry. So at least the EU level, preferably global, but we need to start.
Yes, this is, of course, I think, especially nowadays, important to target not only at EU level, globally, also because as a sector, we don't want to, let's say, disincentivize or penalize the European industry, the European plastic and chemical industry, because we also have to admit that a lot of this non-recyclable plastic that we have to treat, they maybe come from China, all this object made of plastic, we are all floating in our society today. So thank you, Tobias. I will come then to Jakob. I'll move to you. I'll stay close also in terms of countries. I go to Denmark. You also been in DTS since 2013, so you have a big experience like Tobias. But I want to hear your experience as an operator. So likewise, do you think DTS is enough? And linking also to what was said before, have you seen any concrete correlation with recycling and increase in source separation rates?
Thank you very much, Fabio, and thank you to CEWEP and ESWET for having me here. It's an honor. Please allow me just to start just a little different point of departure. I think it's important to say that when we look out at the environment and the climate today, the global temperature now matches and exceeds the warmest periods that we've had the last 125,000 years. And for the last 12 months, the temperature in the global temperature has exceeded 1.5 degrees. So something obviously needs to be done. And we are, I'm very proud of being a plant operator. We are treating the residues of society. We are performing an environmental task that comes from the consumption of goods in society. And by doing that, we emit a lot of CO2. We have been, I think it's safe to say that the plants that we are operating today have a very high standard of environmental, we have full control over our environmental emissions. We're doing a good job, but do we have control over our climate emissions? No, we do not. And in the long term, I think we need to put on the long-term perspective here. This will be a problem for us in the real world. So we need to find a path to see how we can treat waste, the residues of society, without creating an additional climate problem. And that is to introduce new technologies, decarbonization technologies, such as CCS or CCU. And of course, in that perspective, the ETS is vital, because the ETS will send a signal for us to invest, and hopefully this ETS price point will be stable. So that is a good incentive to move in that direction. And you ask me, of course, now when we have been in the ETS for many years, has this had this kind of effect? I must say that we have been struggling to try to implement CCS at ARC, and we have not succeeded yet, thus, even though being in the ETS. There's many factors of this, and it cannot be contributed to the ETS alone. It's also to do with how the national support schemes are set up and all this kind of stuff. But I think I can say for sure that by introducing the ETS and the ETS as it has developed, because when we entered in the ETS back in 2014, I think we paid our first allowances and so on. We actually were granted a lot of free allowances in the start, and that is also why we now only face the price signal is becoming more and more clear now. And that is also actually deciding on how we source our the waste that we can source from outside, our obligational waste. And that is, of course, us also putting a price signal on the fossil content. So the fossil content of what we are sourcing from outside is now very much in our focus and is decreasing, because it is too costly to import waste with a high fossil content. But where does that fossil content then end up? I think that's a better question, because as we all know, waste will not disappear. The ones that think that the waste will, we put a price on it and it will magically disappear somewhere, there's something seriously wrong with their brains, right? It will not disappear. It will go somewhere. And where will it go? It will probably either go to landfill or lesser treatment options. And I think that's the most important part to say in the future. When we look to the future, we must, of course, stop landfilling. We must stop that if we are to implement real decarbonization measures, then we must stop the way that our investment decisions will have the effect that it will only push waste to lesser treatment options. That will be a no-go, and nobody will actually be in their right mind to make investment decisions if that is allowed. And we need investment decisions. We need to develop our industry. And I think that is very important. Of course, being in the ETS, comes without saying, I would argue for the rest of the European states to enter their waste-to-energy plants into the ETS. In that way, we could get a level playing field. It would be good for the ways that we compete with other waste-to-energy plants in all of Europe. But of course, I understand and I fully accept, and I think it is a very valid point that were made by Amager and Spain, that in different countries we have different struggles to struggle with. I think there was a very good example from Spain, saying that it is in Spain it is not the reductions from the chimneys that are so important. It is reductions from the waste going to landfills that are important. When we look at ARC, when I look at my company, I can see we are doing climate accounts, and I can see what climate measures we are getting out of additional recycling, or that we are diverting our collection service from diesel trucks to electrical trucks and so on. All good measures, and we want to do all of it. But the benefit, the climate benefit, is marginal. If we are to make some real climate reductions, some real carbon reductions, we must look at our stack. We must look at our chimney, and that is where we have the biggest contribution. That is because we are in a different waste development stage than Spain are. And this is what it is to be in the same family as Europe. We need to move forward together, so we need to find solutions, I think, where we can look to the future in a more flexible way. And I think the point made by Sweden is actually an excellent point, because you can say that by taking on huge cost of carbon, having to pay the ETS every year, will that make better recycling? Can we see that? Can we see a change in the way that the consumers they choose what products to buy? I think not. It is actually very difficult. So in the way to say that where would the cost land, I think that is the important part. How do we get this price signal out to the consumers for them to choose when they're in the supermarket? I choose this product A with a high fossil content, or I choose product B with a lesser fossil content, and they actually have to pay for it. We need to push the cost out to the consumer, because then we can get some real choices and some real reductions. And nothing will happen without that. So I think the idea of putting the ETS to the producer responsibility scheme, to push it that way, or to push it another way, that it will end by the choice of the consumer, is the right way to go. But we need ETS in order to develop our business. We are here to help society, yes, and we need to develop our business to help society tackling the great problem of climate.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, Jacob, thank you very much, because the goal of this session is to reach a higher level of consciousness, really where the problem is, because you also said something important. The truth is that cheap virgin material, oil and gas, we are floated about it, it's still too cheap, and that also gets into competition with recycling.
Yes.
So I think we have to look beyond. And again, it's not the match ETS yes or no. And coming back to something important that you said, carbon capture. Even before Amalia said, we cannot do it also because now it's too much expensive. So if we're in the ETS, we will just pay. Municipalities, if they have to choose, they will just pay. The price gap, it's too high. So again, do you think that somebody else also upstream should have the responsibility and put a small cost in the products, especially when made with virgin material that they create? Or maybe we can even envision a future where our industry can provide an additional service in terms of climate, where we can take care of that carbon, put it back underground or recycling it, and maybe we can create plastic-free certificates. It's just an idea in the sense that I'm part of the expert group on carbon removals. I think the work on the biogenic fraction is going well. The Commission said before how removals will be integrated in the ETS. We'll have a business case for that. Could we envision a similar scheme for plastics and for plastic producers?
Yes, I think we can. For sure. I think that was one of my arguments, that I think that we need to push the cost to the consumer. You could do it probably in many different ways. I think if we look to the policy toolbox, it is normally much easier to use some of the tools that have been developed. And therefore, my idea is to put it on the extended producer responsibility. It is a scheme that is partially working, at least. So why not put it to the plastic producers? Mm-hmm. You can put it to the oil companies that extracts the oil from the ground as well. This is a good idea. We need to bring them on board, or have the European policymakers make that decision. But we need to put the price signal at the right place in order to change consumption. Because we are there to, as my point, we are there to treat the residues of consumption. So if you want to change consumption, you don't have to look at us. We didn't put the carbon content in our bunker. It came with the products that were consumed by the citizens in our areas.
Yes. Technology is there. We can do it, but we cannot do this alone. And here maybe it goes me jumping to our next speaker. Now, Alessandra, to you. Speaking also of possibilities, you haven't worked directly with the EU ETS file, but you have been very active following the eco-design dossier. So you're much closer to environmental topics in the European Parliament in your daily work. So based on what has been said already, I would like to continue the flow with a similar question. Would you agree that there should be such a mechanism that can link the EU ETS for waste to energy eventually, if we will be included in the ETS, with the production upstream, especially of non-recyclable plastic waste, especially when made with virgin material?
Thank you, Fabio, and thank you so much for your invitation. I'm very glad to be here, to have this kind of exchange of view with you. In general terms, as S&D Group, we support the ETS system, and we believe this to be a very useful tool to guide strategic decisions and investments. I will give more of a political point of view after the technical details that the previous speakers have presented. Of course, I do agree with the linking ETS with the EPR. The political battle of the EPR was one of the most important for me in the last mandate. Unfortunately, I see that many political groups, starting from EPP, are now shifting their position due to their fear of populistic movements. And this is not a problem for S&D Group. This is a problem for Europe. The alliance and compromise between EPP and S&D was the basis for many of the achievements in the last few decades. We just approved an important revision of the pharma package, for example, where both EPP and S&D were very happy about it. This was coming from the last mandate, but in this mandate, unfortunately, it's another story, completely another story. Polluter pays principle is key for the S&D Group, one of the main principles guiding our environmental policy. It's simple for us. Those who generate the pollutants should be responsible and pay for putting it into the environment. This is valid for three main reasons, in my opinion. It's a matter of responsibility. It prevents transferring the price to consumers, pushes industries to change their production toward more sustainable models. This is why we believe this principle should apply to the broadest possible spectrum of productive sectors. We are having these days a discussion on the Urban Wastewater Directive, for example. Here, again, we support the principle that those who produce the pollutants should pay, not the final user or citizens. For us, it's very clear, this principle. If we want to change the production system, we need to push it towards a more sustainable model with the tools we have. And we have legislation and financial incentives or disincentives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alessandra. That made me think a lot, and thanks for also this support from the Parliament, because this is ideas that we try to already investigate here in Brussels with policymakers, and I also personally got told, Fabio, it's too difficult, it's too complex, it's never going to happen to go higher upstream, it's too far. And I also got told EPR schemes were meant to be designed higher up in the hierarchy, just for eco-design, reuse, recycling, but not for residual waste. So, but do you think if waste to energy must have a role in our society, that maybe an EPR scheme on residual waste and on fossil-based content could actually be useful for promoting recycling, reuse, and eco-design, because it will tackle the problem at the source, at the extraction level of virgin material?
Yes, it is. First of all, we worked, for example, on eco-design in a totally different parliament. As said before, when I say that voting matters, this is exactly what I mean. Voting in the European Parliament that offer easy solutions to complex issues is dangerous. It's very dangerous. There is no easy solution for a complex situation. It's another story, no? We are paying the prices now with a parliament that is conditioned by populism. And in the past legislative term, I addressed the report on eco-design, as I do normally with my work, listening to stakeholders, of course, and taking into consideration contributions from all parties, of course, then setting up clear objectives and identify the tools to achieve them, and then negotiate with the colleagues in good faith and then make the political decision. My hope would be to make this possible also in this legislative term, but it takes too dense. I tried yesterday in the plenary to send a clear message to the EPP and to the EPP colleagues. Let's go back to a reasonable discussion among us. We are dealing with very, very serious challenges. We cannot be so irresponsible to leave them to improvisation or to populism. We have to make a good job, and we can do that. So my advice would be to push all political groups to bring them to reason and make them negotiate on these issues on the basis of evidence, on the basis of science and facts, specifically on eco-design and EPR. The principles and objectives included in that regulation are valid for any economic sector or production. Of course, we should not treat all sectors in the same way. We need to adapt, but principles and objectives are valid. I do hope that the Commission will follow up and support these principles also in the Circular Economy Act, which will be a very important moment for the future of our competitiveness. I hope also that Circular Economy Act will be able to uphold the expectations and strengthen EPR, harmonize fee structures across member states to boost recycling, create an unfight secondary materials market, enforce polluter pays principles. These will be, in my opinion, of course, the key priorities for me and for my group, of course, on this matter, and I look forward to discuss with you all on this and continue our cooperation. For me, it's very important to understand also your vision, your point of views. For a good legislator, these moments are very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessandra. And if I may say to this as a follow-up, it's so glad to have you here today, the voice of the European Parliament. And you have in front of you a lot of operators that today work on the field, not only in waste to energy, but in waste management. They came to Brussels, the political capital of Europe. So my twofold follow-up is, what can we do as people on the field to help you, politicians, to take decisions? And thank you for the political insight now on the Parliament. Do you think, what's your feeling, that maybe this EPR scheme for residual waste to help waste to energy could be approved by the Parliament or seen by the Parliament, considering that also sometimes or often as a sector we still face a lot of ideology just by thermally treating waste?
Yeah, it's not easy to answer this question. I hope so. I hope that the principal groups that support the Commission are able to discuss, to negotiate a good agreement. I'm quite positive about that. I'm always a positive person, so I think that your role is fundamental for us. You can push us to be able to create a best environment for all industries, for all citizens. So I think that, yes, we have a very important role. We have a big and strong responsible on our shoulders, but you can do a very, very important job for us. Also to create a good environment on public opinion, because also public opinion is very important to create the best condition to do a good job in the Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alessandra. Wonderful. We are here exactly to have a constructive approach, working together. I think the final goal is the same: save our climate and environment together. So thanks a lot also for the support. Now, let's continue with another perspective from a technology supplier, Kanadevia, Inova, and adding another piece on what we need to look beyond ETS, just not yes and no, but to have the full picture. We said we need to look this holistically, Vanessa. And another big elephant in the room is landfilling. I'm not going to repeat what was said abundantly before, but somebody could see landfills on a climate perspective as a perfect carbon sink for non-recyclable plastic or in general fossil-based material, because principally carbon is going to be stored there eternally. But maybe it's not ideal on environmental perspective. Plus, it was said that if you put residual waste, this can degrade the organic part and generate methane, which is much more problematic. And as Kanadevia, Inova, you recently finalized a study with Prognos that you launched this year, assessing how methane can be harmful for Europe coming from waste. So can you tell us a bit more about this latest work? And would you also agree on the line of what has been said already on plastics?
Thanks, Fabio. And thanks to ESWET-CEWEP for having me here. So first, Kanadevia Inova is a developer and technology provider on waste-to-energy, biogas, and power to gas. So, and we are also operating plants in Europe. So it gives us a specific position to have a holistic approach when we speak about sustainable waste management. And of course, as it has been said, we are really concerned by decarbonizing the waste sector. So we are involved and OPC provider on the Protos first full-scale CCS project in UK. To come back to your point, to look at this holistically, I think we have to address first a dangerous myth. And this is a myth which is really important in the context of the inclusion of waste-to-energy in the ETS. The idea that landfills are a carbon sink. For me, it would be like comparing a leaking pipe with a water reservoir. I mean, you just don't consider what is happening underground. And as all of us know, the fossil part contained in municipal solid waste, plastic, is never clean. I mean, all the waste, the plastic you put in your trash, except if you all wash it, and then really welcome, but contains organic, and not a minimum portion of organics. So that means that this plastic, if it's not put in landfill to avoid carbon pricing, if it ends in landfills, it will not only, emit methane, but because of the organic mixture, but it will also decompose. Because if you put plastic in a landfill, it won't sit there doing nothing. It will disaggregate slowly but surely. It will disaggregate in microplastic, in PFAS, and it will pollute our soil, our water, our air. So it's clear that we cannot see the carbon sink of landfilling as an environmental solution. And if we come back to methane, I think we speak about the urgency. I heard several times, since the beginning of this conference, the net zero by 2050. It's in 20 years. I think all of us know here that the impact of methane, if you look at 20 years, is 3 times more harmful than if we look at 100 years. Methane is 81 more harmful than CO2 if we look at a 20 years horizon. And what I've been surprised by is that when we speak outside Europe or in conference, it seems to everybody that the landfill methane issue is solved in Europe because we have the Waste Framework Directive objective and target of 10% by 2035. But we all know that the reality is really different, that we have a big heterogeneity in Europe. And that's why it was important for us to command it and to do this study with Prognos. We have a strong experience in waste studies, more than 20 years of experience, and IFOI Institute specialized in LCA analysis and modeling of methane emission. So we did this study to really give a status of the methane emission in Europe based on national reporting and Eurostat. So, and we used IPCC model, and we considered 4 different scenarios. The first scenario is if nothing happened, if still the same volume of landfill is, landfill up to 250. The second one, if we just follow the same path, so if we evolve at the same path that what has been done in the 5 latest years. The third one is if we manage to make it happen and if the 10% target by 2035 or 2040, depending of the country, is reinforced. And the 5th is magic. We ban organic waste as for now. What is the consequence when we look at methane emission? And I won't get into detail. I invite you to register. We have a webinar on Tuesday where the full study will be presented. You will find a QR code at the entrance. Sorry for the promotion time, but the main conclusion is that what we see is that in a business a business as usual scenario, methane will be emitted during decades. 37% of the methane emission will occur after 2050. So it's nice to speak about net zero by 2050, but when we put waste in the landfill, it will take more than 80 years to disintegrate, and we are letting a legacy, a methane legacy. And the only way to really tackle the emissions would be to ban organic as for now. Because even if we respect the waste hierarchy, we will halve the emission compared to the current status. And what we see in the study is that we are not on the current trend to reinforce this target directive and to reach it in lots of countries in Europe. So if we do the wrong policy signals now, we will push back waste towards from waste to energy to landfill. And for me, it's a catastrophe. And this being said, this report, as I said, is only based on national reporting and modeling. But as most of you must know, satellite measures have started for 10 years now, and it's clearly proven that we can no longer rely solely on self-reported data. And recent work published in Nature in the beginning of the year by Persson and GEGSAT, it was sponsored by the European Space Agency, I think, surveyed over 150 landfills over 6 continents. And it highlighted the total lack of correlation between the methane emission observed by landfill and the reporting of emissions. There were another study done in Spain, Medusa project, focusing on Las Dehesas landfill, sorry for the pronunciation, and it revealed a supraemitter of nearly 9 tons of methane per hour in Madrid. What we can say is, on average, satellites detect 2 to 3 times more methane than national inventories suggest. So what I said before has roughly to be multiplied by 3 in terms of impact. So first, we always consider 100 years when the emergency is in 20 years, and second, the national reporting are not reliable. So this methane blind spot means that we are sleepwalking into a climate catastrophe because our emissions are maybe invisible to current policy, but they are very, very visible to the atmosphere. And the last but not least point is that we speak about landfill and managed landfill, but we shouldn't forget that we still have unmanaged landfill in Europe. And beyond methane, these unmanaged landfill are chemical time bombs, because when you mix organics and plastic, you create internal heat and methane pockets that lead to uncontrolled fires. And I'm sure that most of you have heard of this Vinci scandal in Belgrade in August 2021, but a massive fire in one of Europe's largest dumps covered the city in toxic smoke for weeks. And these fires burn at low and uncontrolled temperatures, releasing dioxin, furans, and heavy metal directly into the air. So we have lots of examples. You just put landfill fire on Google, you will find lots of things. So to conclude, this brings me to a critical policy warning. We must avoid a regulatory-driven diversion where waste is pushed back down the hierarchy from recovery to landfilling. And if the EU ETS penalizes the visible monitored CO2 from waste to energy, but is not able to consider and is ignoring the fugitive methane emission from landfills, as it has been said several times before, we are creating an economic incentive to pollute, and that is internal carbon leakage, as Paul mentioned before. And we cannot allow a policy design that undermines the polluter pays principle by giving a free pass to methane. So, to reply, I think I've been clear, a landfill is not a sink, and if we want a real circular economy, we must stop burying our problems and we must treat them in controlled, high-standard facilities. And that to be said, I fully agree that if we are ready, on the landfill side, to tax waste to energy, and if we think it's a proper way to decarbonize it, what I say it will only be a proper way to decarbonize it is at the same time the tax is paid by the people who produce plastic, so we have a chance to reduce the source of plastic, and at the same time the money of the HES is used either to impulse the recycling, either to impulse CCUS industry. But otherwise it makes no sense.
Vanessa, thank you so much. I noted a couple of points I would like to pick up. First of all, that maybe sometimes you don't think about. Thank you for reminding how landfills can be chemical bombs. Thank you for using that word. Let's also remember that, yes, we have a lot of landfilling in Europe still, but we are lucky being Europeans. In the other part of the world, situation that's much, much worse. I was looking at the video of a landfill site that just got burned, got fire in India just the last week. So there's still a lot to do, but we are still the lucky ones. So thanks for that reminder. Thank you also for the reminder that it's not obvious that landfills emissions are still underestimated. And there is also interesting engineering and technology now being developed, trying to looking at them from the satellite. So congratulations on your work. Landfill modeling is something extremely complex that also at CEWEP we have been trying to investigate. But precisely because it's complex, we need to be brave because there is a huge slice of emissions there where we need to cut. And lastly, thanks for reminding how time is precious. Time is a valuable thing because the waste that we're going to be landfilling now will be emitting for the next 20 or decades, years. But also, reconnecting on plastics, let's remember that the plastics that we are producing as we speak now will have to be treated by waste to energy maybe in 10, 15, or 20 years, when we're going to empty our basement, maybe we're going to change house in 20 years, we're just going to put all that fossil stuff in the street, the then is going to come to Jacob, and Jacob is going to transform that into energy, into materials, but inevitably also into CO2. So, thanks, Vanessa, and you already said also how you would agree with plastics on the responsibility. I think we're all aligned, and at this point, Karolina, to close the loop again on a circularity perspective, I come to you. So you have heard all panel 1 before with the DG Klima, and now all these considerations of panel 2. How I think now it's clear, it's essential that we link climate and environmental legislation. I think there is no doubt, and I think it's clear at this point how we need to reinforce the polluter pays principle. Or maybe I got inspiration last week, I was in Norway, maybe we should call it producer space principle. I know it's not the same, but I think we could all agree that's a necessary conditions to make in case DTS running for waste. So at this point, I would like to ask you, as DG Environment, how have you been helping the colleagues of Klima? Mette said before, you are in the same building, so what type of interactions you had to also address the point, thank you, Nico, for saying this impact assessment and the quality of it, how integrated it is for waste, and if you could say what we should expect in terms of measures with VTS proposals or other upcoming legislation you are developing in parallel, like the Circular Economy Act, to really have something for residual waste. And let me conclude just saying, I think also we can all agree here, we as waste-to-energy plants, we don't want to take recyclables. There is a lot of companies here that they don't only manage waste-to-energy, they manage the entire value chain, and recyclables should not be thermally treated. They should go to recycling, to a higher step, including organic to composting. But what about the non-recyclable stuff?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm the last speaker, so it's a bit of a challenging position, I have to say. And but I will try to still be interesting. Last time I was in this forum, I was sitting against the background of a fire screen. So this is more friendly, I have to say, but nevertheless not less challenging, or even more challenging. I will maybe start by sending the excuses of my head of unit, François Wackenhut, who couldn't be here, so I stepped in to replace him, but he was summoned to a meeting on the Circular Economy Act with the college on the other side of the street, so that was pretty important as well. But it's always a pleasure to discuss with this group, extremely well informed, very opinionated, but also very balanced, so I will try to do my best. We do work with Klima very closely. I will come back to that. And I think I always believed it was a bad idea to split Klima in environment at some point. We should probably be put together again. But as Mette said, we are on the same floor. That does not necessarily directly translate to good cooperation, but we do have a very good and close cooperation on that. So I'll address that question maybe last. But coming back to the ETS revision and links to the waste policy, which are obviously extremely important, I think everyone agreed that ETS has been successful in many ways in decarbonizing our economy. But also to echo the first speaker from the European Parliament, Mrs. Moretti. Now I'm trying to really not make the mistake between the two speakers. We have this twin crisis. So we have climate change and we have the resource depletion. And I think there's this question that everyone is asking, is the ETS enough to address this twin crisis? And I think everyone agrees, no, we need a comprehensive set of policies that address various aspects of the issue. And so to achieve both circularity goals and climate objectives, and also secure our economic leadership and our economic stability, we need a broad ecosystem of measures. So ETS is an incentive. The reform that the colleagues are now assessing, because all the options are still on the table, let me stress that, is supposed to help the transition, or both transitions, to decarbonization and to circularity, but of course on its own it's not going to achieve that goal. So we need to address landfills, we need to address plastics, we need complementary measures to also look at how to remain competitive, how to have a just transition, because we cannot just make citizens pay, that will also not be accepted, and we need to be effective in what we want to do. So yes, the circular economy, of course, has been here for already decades, and it's not only an environmental policy, it's also a competitiveness policy. It's there to strengthen our security because we really rely on imports of secondary raw materials, and the extraction of raw materials is a major factor contributing to climate change, contributing to biodiversity loss, etc. So it's necessary. We need to go circular, and that needs to be done globally, which is an additional challenge, but let's maybe remain in Europe for the time being. So we need that to future-proof our industries also for the net zero world. But as we have just heard, there's this review now going to its conclusion, and all the options are being assessed. Inclusion of municipal waste, incineration, and landfilling are both being options that are among those assessed. And from our side, the circular economy and the waste unit, of course, we would like to push materials waste to the top levels of the waste hierarchy. So the famous waste hierarchy, landfilling at the bottom, prevention at the top, and all the other options in between. So we want to prevent waste disposal by reducing incineration and landfilling. Incineration can be also considered disposal if it's not energy efficient. And we want to promote prevention, reuse, recycling. That will help us to address all these challenges that we face, and then we can do something else with the waste that we don't burn or don't landfill. And there are a number of policy measures that we can develop. We already have had in place restrictions on landfilling since the 70s. And I want to stress that. I think we've seen that very clearly today. Some member states that joined us in 2004 are further ahead than those that joined in 1986. And that also gives you an optic on how things can be done on the national level, based on the same European legislation. So I take it as a call for the EU to harmonize more the scope of maneuver for the member states so that everyone goes up more evenly in reducing landfilling and going up the waste hierarchy. And that is very obvious from all the data that we receive. There is a big discrepancy between member states. Now, there is also an issue of how materials circulate in the single market. It's not as smooth as for products, and that's obvious because waste is not a product. There is a legacy, there are substances in it that we don't want to come into contact with, so we need stricter regime. But secondary raw materials, on the other hand, should be released from those obstacles, and therefore we are coming up with the Circular Economy Act, which is precisely going to do that. So we need to reduce our dependency on imports of raw materials by moving up the waste hierarchy, so keeping the materials on the market longer, reduce the fragmentation of the single market, lower costs for businesses from different administrative hurdles, but also really strengthen the supply of raw materials and the demand for raw materials in the market. And that will absorb, I think, materials into the top levels of the hierarchy. Yes, as part of this impact assessment for the Circular Economy Act, we're looking at a range of different economic instruments, and including those that will then mitigate what the colleagues are doing with the review of the ETS, because these two proposals importantly come out more or less at the same time in Q3 2026. So if there was a partial inclusion of certain waste management options, such as waste to energy, into the ETS, then we would need to see exactly how this could affect the other levels of the waste hierarchy, especially landfilling, because we want to reduce the risk of diversion of waste to landfills, or to, So what is also very important is that incineration and landfilling are investigated jointly in these reflections to respect the waste hierarchy, but also to prevent an uneven playing field. And that was, I think, mentioned several times today. So if incineration was to be included, but landfills were not to be included in the ETS, we would need some safeguards to make sure that there's no leakage indeed from higher tiers of the hierarchy to landfilling. And those safeguards could include monitoring of methane emissions, and that is also being explored with the use of those satellite techniques. It's very interesting to see how that can detect illegal landfills, because they're not necessarily reported to the Commission or to national authorities. And have a prospect of then, based on this data, because data is not good enough on those emissions, to include landfilling in ETS in the next review. And that would need to be time-bound, ideally. We would also need to look into some accompanying measures already in the Circular Economy Act, and those we have already touched upon. So EPR is one of them. Landfill levies is another one that was mentioned several times. Taxation is really in the hands of the member states, so it's not so easy for us. We would need unanimity to agree on a landfill tax. Banning certain waste streams going into landfilling is, of course, also an option. So these are all elements that we're looking at in our impact assessment on the Circular Economy Act. Yes, so we are working closely with DG Klima on this. Should I elaborate a little bit on how this looks like from the inside, so that you know? I don't know if this is interesting or not. Maybe it will be extremely boring. We do not draft impact assessments together. These are smaller teams in each DG, so we are responsible for the Circular Economy Act, so we conduct the studies and the impact assessment for that, and Meta's team is working on their own impact assessment. But at each step, this impact assessment and then the future proposal is closely consulted with other DGs, not all of them, but those relevant ones. So first at the level of the problem definition, then the development of policy options, then we're looking into the assessment of impacts of those options, and then usually the options that are selected on the basis of this are discussed also between the DGs. This whole product then goes into something called a regulatory scrutiny board, which are very clever people sitting in Berlaymont, and looks a little bit like your master thesis defense. So they have to, we usually fail as a first attempt. They have to prove that all these options make sense. There's a lot of questions and so on and so forth. So once this is done and approved, then the impact assessment is valid, so validated, and it's part of it accompanies the proposal. So the legal proposal is developed on this basis. But it's ultimately a decision of the college. It's not DG Klima that will decide whether or not to do it. It will be the College of Commissioners. So DG Environment can also object this, as can DG Grow, and so on and so forth, and then it's negotiated between all the different cabinets. So it is a lot of back and forth work. But specifically on this proposal, we had a particularly high level of meetings with DG Klima because it's so closely linked to our work. So indeed, we have been working hand in hand on this, but of course they are in the driving seat on the impact assessment and then the subsequent proposal. I think the timing is good, that they come more or less at the same time, because the alignment will be very visible. We'll have to be sure that they go in the right direction together. But it will also facilitate the discussions then with the co-legislators, because this is really where this policy is shaped. We make a proposal, but then it's ultimately decided by the member states and the parliament. So that is also very important. It will take a few years. So it's just the beginning. I also wanted to mention here that the Circular Economy Act is not the only examination of the landfill policies that is on the table. By the end of 2029, we also have to evaluate the whole landfill directive and the waste framework directive. So whatever escapes, if I may say so, will then be back on the table in 2029. But let's hope that will not be necessary. So, yes, I will maybe leave it at that.
Yes. No, very good, and thanks for all the insight. What makes me think, and I think could be interesting also for the audience, is in terms of timing, as pretty much the impact assessment of Klima is about there to be done and to be delivered for waste and UETS. And also in parallel, you're working on the Circular Economy Act, which maybe is already finalized. How this novel concept that we just discussed before, that I renamed it Producer Space Principle for Residual Waste, can be integrated, or maybe it's already there?
No, not in the Klima proposal, because they don't have the right legal basis and policy for that. This will be part of the Circular Economy Act, because we are reforming EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility. It is not harmonized. Producers are facing a lot of obstacles in the internal market, and there is really a plea to harmonize, for instance, EPR fees, to prescribe what they should cover, to make them more transparent, and so on and so forth. So this will be part of the Waste Framework Directive, and that discussion is still on the table. We're a bit less advanced with our proposal than colleagues in DG Klima. And then the same issue with the levies or other fees or any landfill restrictions, that is also going to be part of the Circular Economy Act. What form and shape, legally speaking, this will have, it's still to be decided, because we are dealing with quite a wide range of legislation. So we have the Landfill Directive, but we also have several provisions in regulations dealing with waste, such as, I don't know, end-of-life vehicles, packaging, batteries, that contain elements on extended producer responsibility. So we'll have to see what kind of package of measures we need.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And in terms of connecting dots and making bridges, because we are here to find solution and concrete solution. Of course, we cannot find everything today, but to get a link with panel number 1, Donatas, for example, gave a concrete example on Lithuania being in DTS and about the blacklisting, how as operator just starting to say no to certain plastic waste stream that contain a high fossil content. Either they are going to charge the recyclers or the customer 2-3 times more, or they just say no. And it came out that one problematic stream is car fluff, so the residue, the shredded plastic from cars. This is problematic, understood. You're not taking anymore because then that's too high. It's not because you cannot treat it, it becomes too high. So could we maybe start focusing on some problematic fossil-based streams? And for example, for car fluff, with an EPR scheme, car manufacturers can include a small amount in, of course, the car is going to become more expensive. We have to be careful with competitiveness in Europe, which is already very critical. But could this be, for example, an opportunity to then alleviate the cost downstream?
I will not say yes, but I take your point. I will bring it as part of the discussion. There are also legacy substances that are candidates potentially for considering the context of extended producer responsibility, such as PFAS. So, yes, this is an interesting tool to address such streams that are problematic, that basically cannot go anywhere. Because we have, it's a high calorific value, so the incineration sector will not be necessarily interested in having this in, especially if they're included in the ETS. We don't want to landfill. We cannot export it because of the waste shipment regulation. So what do? Ideally, we should not produce goods that result in this kind of material. So, but that also takes a while. So indeed, I think there we need solutions. EPR could be one way, but I think from the policy-making point of view, we might not want to be as prescriptive as, saying that producers should pay for the disposal of EPR of, vehicle fluff. Yes. We need some broader mechanisms to deal with such issues. But yes, this is also on the table.
Great. Thank you very much, Karolina. A reaction from Jacob.
Yes, I think it's a very good example from Lithuania, and I also think it's a very good example that the ETS actually works. Because you don't want to have this kind of fossil feedstock in your plant, and that's because you have a clear price signal to the market, and you react on that as an operator. And that's also one of the strengths why the ETS is a good tool, because it is technology neutral. We react not to say that this has to be treated in that and that way. We just we say no, and we have to find solutions somewhere. So I think the task is we need to decarbonize, and of course we need to lower the carbon emissions from our operations. How to do it? We need to find that out. But the most important part here is to get the price signal from the market.
Yes. Because
otherwise nothing will happen.
Yes.
So in that aspect, I think we need to consider very seriously to put the waste-to-energy plants in Europe into the ETS.
Yes.
And I recognize, and I think it's very clever to say how can we do it in a good way. Should we have some free allowances, especially from the south and the eastern countries, to ease their way into the system? This will not be easy. This will be a very complicated task, but we need to look at that direction. That's our main path.
Yes.
is in that way.
Yes, I mentioned car fluff, but the sky's the limit.
Yes.
Non-recyclable plastic packaging,
Yes.
toys, electrical,
Yes.
furniture. And actually on this, as we are here to look beyond and trying to envisioning the future a little bit, I would like to explore with all of you one last point. Maybe not everybody knows that at EU level there is already an interesting tool. It's called the Plastic Own Resource that was created after Brexit to put in more budget at the EU level. And this fee corresponds to 80 cents of euros per kilo. So based on the volumes of non-recycled plastic packaging produced and put on the market at national level. If we look at the numbers, in 2023, this amount collected with this plastic own resource was 7.2 billion euros. And looking at the numbers showed by Ella earlier this morning, if we make a comparison, the EU ETS will cost for the waste-to-energy sector will be a bill of about 4 billion euros under a carbon price of 100 euros per ton. So plastic own resource, 80 cents per kilo, 7 billion euros, waste-to-energy in the ETS, 4 billion euros, to give you an order of magnitude. So my question to you is, as with these tools, we can see how we can maybe collect sufficient funds to completely or offsetting the allowances the operators have downstreams. Could we mimic this type of tools, or could we use this existing tool as the plastic own resource that today are just used for the EU budget, so maybe they could be mimicked or used more reasonably. So we maybe already have the solution out there, maybe now it's just a matter of political commitment. What do you guys think?
I think it's a great idea. And I think it's a very good idea in the way that we actually have a tool. Of course, we need to persuade the policymakers to look at this tool and to direct the funds in the way that this can happen. But there is an actual tool out there. It's a matter of political will, and I think the idea is good, Fabio.
Great. I don't know, Alessandra, if you have maybe to leave because maybe you have a... Maybe you please take the floor also.
I agree about what you said now. I think that we have all tools, and so we have to decide where put the resources, and this is a political level decision. So I think that yes, you have the responsible to give us some suggestions, and then we have the responsibility to choose. So I think that this is a good thing to do, in my opinion. I hope also from the Parliament.
No, but great. As we are in Brussels, I said the political capital of Europe, having this opinion.
And thank you very much for this opportunity. For me is very important. Thank you for your job and for your words.
Thank you, Alessandra.
Sorry, I have to come back.
We will definitely stay in. We'll definitely stay in touch. Thank you. Grazie. Thank you very much again. Is very glad to hear also the support from the Parliament in this very important topic. But at this point, let's also have your opinion with another slide that I would like to cast and put out there. So should at this point a mechanism at EU level link the CO2 cost for waste to energy with the production of virgin fossil-based material upstream, for example, non-recyclable plastics? You have 4 options. Yes, this mechanism should be established at the EU level. Yes, this mechanism should be established, but at member state level. No, the cost should be reflected by the waste-to-energy operator to the gate fees only, or on a polluter-pays principle, waste-to-energy operators are the ones solely really responsible for their CO2 emissions. And while the audience replies to this question, I'll go through you guys. So maybe Tobias, what would you choose among the 4?
As I talked about before, we see it might need a fee or tax or something on the product, since not full of the cost of the operator of waste incineration stands up on the consumption. Therefore, you need to push it up, and then you need a mechanism So I tend in that direction.
So your vote will be number 1, I guess, at EU
Yes,
level.
but it then depends how full of these
Okay.
costs shall be pushed up,
Sure.
and then that we can discuss.
Jacob.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think the first question is or the first option, also leans towards that we have a European market.
Yeah.
And it's much better to try to find solution on the European level and on the European market instead of the national level, which is quite clear from the answers here. And that also goes to say that the ETS is a European instrument. So it is quite clear that this could be the way to go.
Vanessa.
I am fully aligned. If we take a EU ETS decision at EU level, we need to have, measure at EU level. And I think we need to avoid 2 things, as you said, is to transfer the cost to the citizen and to end up with plastic in nature. So we need to incentivize the reduction of plastic on the market, but not to having refused, into waste to energy, because we cannot let it, in the nature. So, yeah.
Karolina, what would you choose among the 4?
It really looks almost like policy options in an impact assessment. So I just take a screenshot of this, and yes, we'll look into that also.
Okay.
Very interesting idea.
Okay.
He's a good seller.
Yeah.
So maybe as again, because we are here in Brussels and there are a lot of public consultation, maybe we just did a live public consultation, but from the results and also the audience, maybe
the result is quite clear indeed of this consultation.
Sold. I think you sold it, Fabio.
But what I think it's clear is that we need a new carbon management paradigm. I think this is for sure when we talk about waste and when we talk about the connection of waste with ETS. So now at this point, I naturally would like to open the floor for questions from the audience. Please introduce yourself with name and affiliation. Let's start with this side and others. And then we go, maybe we already did before. Well, let's start with you, Bastian.
Yeah, Bastian Wenz from ETAT, from representing the German waste-to-energy plants. One thing that I missed in the discussion, or what is important also for the discussion, is when establishing a level playing field. I think that's one of the key things. Just as a background, Germany, you've seen the figures. We do have the largest market for waste to energy, obviously also the largest emissions. We have almost no landfilling of that generates methane emissions. So basically, if that instrument goes the wrong way, basically the one of the most advanced systems, waste to energy, waste management systems, actually pays the most, which is very hard to explain to, I would say, to German citizens. So that's why it's extremely relevant to have it to really establish a level playing field. And one thing that hasn't been discussed is also the measurement of emissions is not trivial. It's complicated. It's done in Germany, for instance. Right now, we don't really have any better solutions than putting a CO2 backpack on certain different waste streams. Then we can actually pass down the costs to the waste producer. Fine. But we don't really know what comes out of the stack. If you know what comes out of the stack, you can't really boil it down to the waste producer. So that is an important thing to clarify, because if a system is established and the rules are not the same everywhere, then you will also have differences in the market. And again, I mean, for us, for instance, in Germany, it will mean the repercussions hit us the hardest if it goes the wrong way. And I agree that if it should be a solution on a European level that has the same rules for everybody, and there should be almost no loopholes. I think that's an important thing to really look at how is it measured, how is it evaluated, and another suggestion could be just to price the waste instead of the emissions, because measuring the emissions creates loopholes, or may create loopholes. Thank you.
Other questions from the audience? I wanted to give it, sorry, Amalia, to, well, is there a microphone here? Then I come back to you, Unico. Amalia?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I wanted to just to ask, because I have listened carefully. I think there are different approaches to the issue, which I fully understand. We have different perspectives and different situations. But trying to put some logic on what we have here, I think we have here that we need to see how the mechanisms to really transfer the costs, if it's in the ETS, to transfer the cost that really makes sense to really put the pressure in the right direction, that is to reduce the emissions and to move the markets also, so for more sustainable products or whatever. Also, we have said that, well, we don't have enough data for landfill, we are not capable to measure so well, we have to start monitoring better to gather more data, and so on. And from my logical, I would say, and why? Because sometimes to hurry is not the best solution. We say take it, dress you slowly, because then we are in a hurry, no? So maybe it will be good to stand by for a moment, because the pressure now to go for waste-to-energy municipal emissions, if I see that in Spain, I don't see it at all. So we are not on a pressure for that. Maybe to work on all these schemes to see how this can work better, to work in landfill issues, to avoid landfilling, to measure, to see how we can put the pressure on that, and then to come back with a final solution, which is more approach, be more conscious of the issues we have. I don't know, maybe it's possible to try to change a little bit the sequence of the procedure, because why? At the end, sometimes we are just in a mess and we have to do that, but maybe we have to stop a little bit, because this has been said by everyone. We need to focus more on the landfills. We need to have better data. We need to really put the pressure on the producers, or in another way that we change, and we are really way more sustainable. So I wanted to ask, because I have heard maybe it will be a good moment to start, maybe to tackle all these issues and to make a roadmap for the sector, especially thinking on municipal waste, which at the end all the citizens are going to pay that. So we have to look for the proportionality principle also very carefully.
Please, Tobias, if you would like to react, and then, okay?
Yeah, actually, it's also a question for the audience, I would say, because related to this, I think, for me, the option here, because, of course, we can think, we need to find a strategy, but we need to find it very quick, because what's in stake is that we have the operation of waste incineration into the ETS, or you're kept out. And that we will find pretty soon, because I will discuss this tomorrow with the Commission in a workshop, natural targets for 2040. Sweden and the rich countries in Europe, we have very, very ambitious targets. Other countries, we have less ambitious targets for 2040. So we're talking post-2030 now, and their targets. And, of course, these countries with less ambitious targets is also the countries with landfills. So perhaps in that situation, at least for me, is that we, instead of have waste incineration in Sweden, because we have so ambitious targets and national targets, is that this waste goes into Spain or Bulgaria or Greece, because it's much cheaper, because they have less ambitious national targets. And that's the key, at least for me, coming to climate perspective, that's the key issue which we are discussing now, actually, related also to this in ETS or not. Yeah. So that discussion goes now, and it will impact a lot also landfills if we go in that direction with natural targets.
As I saw the whole panel wanted to react, let's go in order. Jacob? Or Vanessa?
Ladies first, okay.
Ladies first.
I fully agree that we need to hurry, but I also really agree that we should take the most efficient measure first. And for me, the most efficient measure is not the inclusion in the ETS. The most efficient measure is to ban organic from landfill. And if you do that, you reduce long-term your impact of climate change. And if we are ready on the landfill side, then we act on the waste to energy. But I agree with you, if we act first on the waste to energy, and if we are not ready, then we risk waste export, we risk waste crimes, we risk waste diversion, we risk a lot counter effects. So we need to hurry, but in the right direction.
Thank you, Vanessa. Let's stay on this side. Karolina, you wanted also to react?
Yes, just very quickly, I completely agree on the level playing field. It's a big issue. Measurement of emissions, I think that will be part of ETS, including from landfilling, because we would like to insist that this is really improved, and we need a methodology so that we can reflect if in a few years we want to include also landfills in ETS. On the transfer of costs, I mean, putting pressure in the right direction. We've been putting pressure in the right direction since decades, and it's still not there in many places. So we are now trying to change the pressure from targets and roadmaps and things like that to really using economic instruments, because we take member states to court for landfilling too much, and it doesn't work, to be very blunt. So yes, we need to do something about this. I think then this plastic own resource example, this is maybe an interesting instrument. But then, yes, again, is it going to be another sort of tax paid by a member state to be allowed to do the wrong thing? This we should not also tolerate, because this sometimes it happens. I pay my fine and I continue the practice that should not be continued. So, yeah. And the last comment, there is a target, legally binding target, to separately collect biodegradable waste from January 2025. And there's a ban on landfilling of waste that is suitable for recycling. So you have your ban on organic landfilling. It's there, but it's not implemented and it's not enforced. So there we need additional instruments. Probably we need to go to EPR, probably we need to go to some sort of levies, etc. But I'm also thinking aloud here, like if we ban landfilling or introduce a really high price on landfilling right now, who will pay for that? Because this will also not be for free. Then again, we increase the price to consumers because they will have to pay for that waste being, I don't know, what happens with it. I mean, we build infrastructure overnight, we will not. So it's a complex issue. We don't have much time. We're trying our best to find a solution so that we move in the right direction. But yeah, I agree. It's a lot of pressure from different sides.
Very conscious of time, and I see you, Jacob, but I think it's important for everybody. It's an element, a detail that I think it was also in Matte's slide, but it was not mentioned today. This possibility of having a cap-and-trade system for landfilling within the Circular Economy Act. Speaking about instruments. Is this something you are developing, we should expect? Or how could we help in case, as operators, to provide you figures and numbers for your work?
It's one of the options that we look at in the impact assessment. And yes, if you have new figures, then please provide them. There was an open public consultation on that with a series of questions. I think you can still go back to that and provide new figures if they exist. But yeah, I mean, we need that rather soon.
Okay.
Because, yes, we're now trying to at least put pressure on our consultants to finish their report so we can start drafting.
Thanks.
Just two small comments. One on cost. yes, cost will rise. No ways, two ways about it. Of course it will rise, either on probably on landfill and on waste to energy. It will do so. And on the mechanism, on measuring, all the Danish plants, all the Swedish plants, all the plants in Lithuania have measured this for a long time. We have measuring methods, and they work so well that our tax authority, they believe in them. So we are charged every year with the ETS, and that goes to how to transfer the cost. We know exactly how much we pay in these taxes. If we can take this tax and put it to the EPR system, that would be fantastic. That would transfer the cost, and then they have to find out how to divide it between their members. Mm-hmm. Why not?
Yes. Yeah. So very conscious of time. Maybe a last question that I saw there. If it's still...
If there is no other...
Or maybe there is a new... Yes, to also change the audience, please.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Kirsty Jones-Williams. I'm from Geminor. Sorry, I should stand up, but I have a cup of coffee in my way.
Of course.
Yes, so I'm from Geminor. We're a B2B. We handle waste from waste producers, municipalities, private industry, and principally deliver to waste-to-energy facilities across Europe, handling about 2.4 million tons every year. I just wanted to bring it back to the short term and what we're seeing at the moment, particularly when we are looking at the conversations around agreements in Sweden and in Denmark with off-takers. If we think about this level playing field across Europe, we see a different playing field just within Sweden and Denmark in terms of how that cost of the ETS passes up the waste value chain. So, for example, some facilities, because there's a price signal now that has a significant impact on your TCO, on your total cost of operation from this ETS, obviously now that cost needs to be passed up the value chain to us as waste traders and then up to producers. But we're seeing different implementations of that, differentiated gate fees based on plastic content in the waste. And my question, I think, or what I would really like to make sure is that the methods in which these costs are passed up the value chain in the short term are also considered by the EU, because we have established the Research and Development Department and been looking at waste composition for only the last 12 months, but we have considerable data now to show that the fossil CO2 emissions at a waste-to-energy facility don't always correlate with the plastic content. We look at some of the textiles. We've got 40% textiles in a lot of the RDF, and we know that has a fossil footprint, but that's not considered in these agreements around passing on differentiated gate fees, etc. I'd also say that we get a kind of, in some cases, a blanket increase in the gate fee and a blanket increase upstream to the waste producers, so that those municipalities that invested heavily on sorting and are delivering actually a low fossil carbon waste to energy facilities are penalized just as heavily as those who mix in everything and haven't invested in sorting. So it's a question / a statement to consider the methodology that's passed on from CO2 emissions to how that should be played in contracts and differentiated gate fees upstream, and whether the EU has a role in that.
Yes, I think Jacob is the right person to
I think it's a very, very valid question, statement. And it is very complicated. And I will add another complication, is that in the different countries, it is quite different of where this cost today is passed on. It's passed on to the heat consumer or to the waste producer. And it's different. And I think that's also why, if we're talking about a level playing field, it would be very good to pass this cost on to the extended producer responsibility schemes, because then it will end on the product. And you as a consumer can choose whether you would like to buy this product with a high fossil content, which will probably carry a higher price than another product with a lower fossil content. I think that's the way to go. It's much easier to say it, that this will be it, and than to implement it, because the devil is in the detail in this. And I think you pointed out a very, very important detail that we need to figure out.
Thank you. So I think the goal of today was not to find all solution, but again, to raise awareness and get to a higher level of consciousness of where the problem is and what needs to be done. So for the sake of time, I will close the floor here for questions, but there's going to be a reception afterward. In 10 seconds, a few words to close this panel. So what would you say, each of you, it's fundamental to consider for the future of waste to energy if combined with ETS? Tobias.
I'm even more convinced that we need to do something with landfills.
Okay.
I was before, but I am even more now.
Landfills? Jacob.
Exactly. Close the landfills, and then we can use the price signal in ETS to develop the most efficient solutions on the market.
Thank you. Vanessa. Same?
Yeah, landfill, action on landfill, and use intelligently the money from the ETS on plastic recycling or CCUS solution, and report it where it should be reported to minimize it.
Upstream, yes. Clear? Last word.
I will insist that we need to invest everywhere, because if we close landfills, we also have to do something with the recyclates, and if they're not absorbed by the market, and sometimes they're not because the prices of virgin are higher, then we also have a problem. So we need measures everywhere.
Okay, so panelists, thank you very much. You've been fantastic. It was great engaging with all of you. Audience, likewise. Thank you very much also for all this discussion. I close hoping that we will leave something inspirational, maybe visionary, for building a better future for climate and environment. So thank you very much, and please give a last round of applause for our speakers on stage.